What does behavioral economics have to do with corporate learning? Well, there's actually a lot in common, and you may be surprised. We're going to dive into this with Melina Palmer from the Brainy Business on this episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, starting now. Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Hey.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Melina. We're glad that you're here.
Same.
So we are recording this. This is actually the first episode that we are recording in 2025. So it is kind of the time to check in a little bit on our holiday to-dos. And we were just talking in the green room beforehand, which, as you can imagine, is not actually a green room. It just means we're not recording yet.
Oh, we could be sometimes.
Totally. So these guys noticed that one of the things I did was I have redecorated my office, and now that we're on video, y'all can see I am transforming it from the arcade/office that it traditionally has been to a office/tiki bar with a couple of arcade machines.
Slash arcade.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which
So
you're
that's
going to
been
be
fun.
getting another one, correct? So we see
I
one in
am.
the back.
I am. So I have commissioned a virtual pinball machine that will actually let me be able to play reproductions of pretty much any pinball machine that has ever been created. And I'm super happy about that. So hopefully the next time we do a recording, y'all will be able to see it.
Nice.
All right, and so I'm going to show you a picture of my project.
Yes.
I created organization in the garage, right, with the bins from Costco, and I used a bunch of 2x4s. So that was my holiday project.
So for those that are not watching, Dana showed a large stack of a storage structure that he created.
What is it, like
Which those
16,
are a lot of
16
yeah,
tubs?
a lot of them.
Dana?
There's 20 tubs in there.
Wow.
20 tubs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just a couple of days ago, as we were taking down Christmas, we went through and we filled up the Christmas tubs, and then we filled up the Valentine's tubs and
Yeah.
Easter and the whole thing. So we're down to one. There's one left. So Julie is off to Hobby Lobby, I think, to fill it up now.
So all 20 of those are for holiday decorations? For
They're just
various
holiday
times of the year?
decorations. Yeah.
After my own heart, I would say that
Yeah.
it sounds like a fan.
Our home looks like Hobby Lobby display each holiday. So.
Absolutely. Jake, did you do anything productive over the break?
First week, of course, was mostly holiday stuff, and then the second week spent decluttering, which was fantastic. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's probably when I spend the most money, actually, because then we declutter and then realize what type of organizational furniture thing do we need. I didn't build mine. I didn't. I wish I used to. I used to do woodworking. My kids actually were surprised when I told them that the other day that I used to do that. But I just have such a small garage now that I had to sell a lot of my stuff. But I did think about it, Bob. That was actually one of my thoughts of maybe this year in 2025, I reinvest in some of my woodworking equipment to build some of my new stuff.
Yeah.
First thing would be a mudroom update, and that's something I've done in the past. So that might be something.
Very practical.
Yeah.
For a family with 2 young girls. Great.
Yes.
Melina,
A lot of
anything you want to check in on holidays?
Well, I love all the organizational decluttering stuff. Those are things I'm a big fan of. And we did some of that. We're in the midst of it. Our big thing ended up, we've been working on the new website for the Brainy Business for, I think, 97 years. And
So have you decluttered it? And
and reorganized virtually
Yeah.
and all of that. And so, it was like definitely going to be done by year end. And then there was this big sort of hiccup that created a lot of extra unexpected work to be able to get it done. So it actually, though, launched at the beginning of, so on January 7th, we went live with the new one, and it's here, and it's so much better than what we had. So worth it.
It looks good.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely.
Thank you.
It's lovely.
It has search functionality and organization. Really, we've been working on that all year. So, similar.
So you really pushed
vein-
the envelope on it.
Oh yeah, I would say yeah. I mean, we've been working on it on all the planning for a really long time. So, and thinking about how it applies to the way we do work and everything, like you would within the different rooms you're talking about. How we're going to use this in the future. I think it goes with corporate training and all that sort of stuff too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys know what I always say about pushing the envelope. No matter how hard you push the envelope, it'll still be stationary.
So
I was waiting for something
let's
to come
transition
from that, but let's
into
transition. Yeah.
formally welcoming Melina Palmer. So I have cobbled together a little intro. No, this is her official intro. Our guest today has unlocked the hidden psychology behind why people do what they do, and her insights will transform how you think about human behavior. When companies like Walmart, Google, Procter & Gamble, and Mars need to understand what drives human behavior, they call her. Her chart-topping podcast, The Brainy Business, has more than 1.3 million downloads over 170 countries, and her 3 best-selling books have earned multiple international awards. She teaches applied behavioral economics via Texas A&M University, has been featured in the Washington Post, Forbes, Inc., Investopedia, and Business Insider, as well as graced the stage of TEDx Portland and South by Southwest. Known for taking complex science and turning it into practical strategies that drive meaningful change, Melina loves training corporate teams on why customers buy and employees buy in. Please welcome behavioral economics. See, I made a mistake at the very end. That was such a clean read. Please welcome behavioral economics effort. Gosh, please welcome. See, this is all going to get captured and put at the end. I know.
Oh, yes, it is.
No, at the end.
Yeah. Please welcome behavioral economics expert and founder of the Brainy Business, Melina Palmer. Yay.
Hey, there we go. Nice job.
thank you.
Yeah. That was one of those
Boy, that
moments
was
while I was reading that, I was like, this is a really clean read. I'm doing a really good job with this. And then, that's just like...
Yeah, it's like, don't mess up
setting
now.
yourself
Don't mess
up
up now.
Exactly. But let me share beyond the formal introduction. Melina and I met, probably 4 or 5 months ago, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe a little bit less, but right around there, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, we were introduced by, I think, Paul Zach, right?
Paul Zach, yes.
Paul Zach, yeah, our friend. He's definitely a friend of the show. We've had him on a few times. And so Melina and I talked, and I realized that, as I hinted at the cold open, even though the fields that we are officially in of behavioral economics.
It's the funny thing of economist and economics, and you pronounce them slightly differently. People get hung up on it all the time. So all good.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, between what Melina does and what we do, that there's actually a lot of similarities, and also Melina and I just vibed, and we have a lot in common. Obviously, having a podcast. Our podcast is big. Her podcast is way even bigger, and we also have an uncommon appreciation for musical theater.
Bob, one other thing that you talked about the connection with Melina. One other thing, and as you were doing the intro, was is we take a lot of neuroscience-y stuff and try and turn it into common speak, so that we can help our learning designers access that body of science. And what I heard was that, Melina, you do a lot of the same thing. You take a lot of good science and you say, okay, let me turn that into English, and then figure out how to apply it. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a funny thing so in starting the podcast, I've had mine since 2018, and I didn't really think too much of it, but have found over time that it's sort of a superpower to be able to translate academic articles into a way that everybody says, oh, I get that. I'm going to go try that. Like, I know how I would use that, and that makes sense, and I get what that means. And so a thing that I figured was just sort of everybody reads things this way and can translate what this means is not the case. I know there have been so I teach through Texas A&M University's Human Behavior Lab, and many of the doctoral students have asked, like, can Melina write the intros? Can she help redo all our papers for some of these, which say, no, Melina can't rewrite all those for you. But yeah, it's just.
But you've got ChatGPT. You can always use that.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing.
Super helpful now. I love that. Well, that's a great launch into this. So, Melina, I would love to hear, how did you get into the world of behavioral economics, and what do you find as some of the intersections between behavioral economics and corporate learning, because that's also part of your job. You teach as well. So
yeah. So my story, I guess, when I decided I was not going to go to school for musical theater, which was always the plan, just to bring that back into the point of where we talked about that. When I was in high school, I went through a couple of different options and then decided to major in what ended up being marketing. And there was just like one section of one book, like one little thing that was talking about this buying psychology, why people do the things they do and the decisions they make. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is just the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and I want to go get a master's in this. And I spent the better part of 10 years calling schools around the country that said, that's not a thing. It doesn't exist. We don't have programs for that. Sorry, essentially. So I ended up, put a pin in it, put it up on the shelf, went into industry, had worked in an advertising agency, started a company, and then was working inside of a financial institution running their marketing department. And at this time, ended up being introduced to a team out of Duke University called the Center for Advanced Hindsight, which happens to be their behavioral economics team there. And they were talking about the research that they were doing. And I realized that this was what I had been looking for a decade. And so in finding that through this innovation fellowship I was in, just jumped all the way in and said, yes, please, I want to get this, found myself a master's program. And I knew I was reasonably early because I had spent such a long time looking for the field, right? But on the applied side especially, there was just like nothing that anybody was talking about in how you actually use this stuff. The academic piece, there was research and things being done, but there wasn't anything about how companies can use it, and things that were really clear to me about how it can apply into brand messaging and corporate strategy and training and teaching and advertising, all these things just wasn't really anywhere. And so through a series of serendipitous events, ended up launching the podcast at the perfect time, where then everybody really started to find the term of behavioral economics and start looking into psychology and business much more than they had. And that came together, at the right time for the show to take off in that way, and help to bring some awareness there. And so, my first book is about the customer side of, what your customer wants and can't tell you, and then jumped right into what your employees need and can't tell you, and understanding how our brains really react to change. How we present information is more important as to whether or not people buy in or remember or anything than whatever the information is itself. And so being able to better present information to people, whether it's employees or customers, is the focus of all of what I do in training organizations that I work with, and students, and through the show and all that.
So since you're really good, and you said you're basically like a ChatGPT, like the human version of that, sum it up. What would be, so give us your pitch. What is behavioral economics?
Yep.
And so what's the basics of it?
The simplest way I like to say is that if traditional economics and psychology had a baby, you would have behavioral economics, right? But really, it's an understanding decision making and how we make choices. And so, economic models are really built on what someone somewhere thinks people should do, and what the logical choice is. But that's not really how humans make decisions. And so by understanding the rules that the brain actually uses to make its decisions, we're able to better predict whether someone will click on this versus that, whether they'll remember something or not, whether they'll get annoyed and stick in their status quo, whether they'll get all the things done they anticipated getting done. Typically they don't. All these different aspects of how we make decisions and how you can present information to help essentially nudge, is someone going to click on this button versus that one, or a decision of if they're going to complete a report on time, or whatever that happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I was so happy to have our paths cross when they did, because guys, we've been talking for the last several months about the expansion of corporate learning from just you're putting on training events to being better focused on how are we influencing people's behavior? How are we getting them to do the things that we need them to do to deliver the business results that we want, and kind of expanding what we think of that to mean. And so I just saw so many great connections there in terms of, helping people not just know or practice a new skill, but also be motivated and make the decision to do what they should be doing at the right times.
Melina, as you were talking, I couldn't help but think of Don Norman's book, The Design of Everyday Things, because there's a lot of psychology in the actual design of products.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you're at the messaging part of that. Is there a connection between those, or am I missing?
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say there is. And in thinking about, user experience, whether that's customers or like employees going through training, is all kind of the same. And within behavioral science, we look a lot at what's called choice architecture, and how you position choices for people. And the way that you present information makes it more likely whether they're going to pick something at the top. So if you list options, say alphabetically, versus, reverse alphabetically or in a random order, it will impact what people are more likely to choose. So you think about even, in an HR or team, you're sending out a survey to see, well, what topics are people going to be most interested in getting training on? And it feels like they're going to give equal weight and evaluation to everything on that list, and they're going to pay perfect attention and balance how they all tie in for their best life moving forward. And as I'm saying it, I can tell you're all sort of laughing, right? Because no, they don't. They definitely don't. And the order you put them in, how you phrase it, will have more impact on what people pick, often than what's even on the list, especially if it's a really long list. And so the rules that the brain would use to help to determine which items it's most likely to choose are some of what we know from behavioral economics and behavioral science. And so you can use that in the way that you would present the list at all. Like maybe you break it into categories instead of having something with 75 options on it. Or you can expand how long it is. They're more likely to remember what's at the beginning of a list or the end of the list versus all the stuff in the middle. And so when you have the awareness of how that's going to be nudging the choice someone makes, you can change your approach to how you present it to help more reflect what their true feelings would be, of course, but also to make it so sometimes if we're maybe encouraging people to sign up for, to sign up for 401k or retirement, you can present options so they're more likely to do something they actually want to do, but may kind of forget in the day-to-day to actually take the actions they would need to take.
So as a teacher and educator as well, and thinking about choice architecture, how do you think of that within the way that you teach the topic?
Yeah, so I definitely layer in a lot of storytelling in the way that I think about the choice architecture piece and understanding really. So I should have mentioned this earlier when you asked me about, kind of breaking it down to the simplest piece. But, some research shows that we humans make an average of 35,000 decisions each every single day.
Wow.
35,000 decisions.
I'm retired, so I make fewer. I'm in the range of 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have the chocolate
so
and the
we're
strawberry.
constantly making decisions, but we don't remember most of them, right? So I always like to, say so how many decisions do you remember making yesterday? And that, people say 2 or 10. And if you were really pushed, maybe you could get 100 or something. But there are so many choices you're making all throughout the day that you aren't even consciously aware of. And that is because this other system within the brain, I just refer to it as subconscious for ease, but within behavioral science, we talk about system 1 and system 2. So that subconscious system 1 processing is making all these thousands of decisions, like one every 2 seconds. You're choosing things constantly. And when you know the rules that are being used to make those choices, that's where we get into the behavioral science piece. So if we think about that in like really life is just a series of micro moments and little moments where people can be getting distracted all the time and do other stuff. And so if we keep that in mind when we think about the way we're going to present learning, so I'm not going to have a really long monotone training session and expect people are going to remember something from the middle or really any of what was talked about with any sort of enthusiasm, right? So having a mix in of video versus something a little bit funny that's going to catch them off guard and bring back attention, taking a moment to pause and ask a good question and help them to be thoughtful about how they're going to apply something, understanding the context of how they're learning. So is this a virtual training? Is this in-person training? Is this asynchronous and they're watching it on their own time? Are they on their phone? Are they going to be distracted by something on their phone? Do they have kids running around their house? Like all those things would come into play in the way that I present information. And with that in mind as well, when we think about the micro moments, to know that it's never a be all end all, and you can't think about anything as the whole only, right? But we do want to think like at the end of this, if they only do one thing, if they're going to remember one key moment, like what's the biggest thing that matters? How are we going to then line up all these little micro moments to help make that possible and know that this isn't the only time that we can be providing information? Something might be better if we supplement it with an email follow-up, or do we do the quiz the next day to help retain learning? All these different aspects that come into understanding how we present the information and opportunities for them along the way.
I'm intrigued with the whole idea of choice architecture, and I came across a phrase the other day, and I don't remember whether it was the paradox of choice, the fallacy of choice, or the illusion of choice. I don't. Does any of those ring a bell with your work?
Absolutely, yeah. So Paradox of Choice is a book and series of work by Barry Schwartz, which is really fantastic. And knowing that we humans like to think that we want all the choices and all the opportunities, and we tend to think we should give people all those options and choices, but our brains are wired to keep us in the status quo, and when we have too much choice, tend to say, I'll deal with that later. Feels like there's a lot of work to be done.
Go get some ice cream. That's a better choice.
Well, it's how I feel when I go into the Thai restaurant bias that literally has like 240 items on the menu.
We actually use that as an example when we're working with clients here at the Brainy Business, is kind of saying, like, if you think about a menu and how they present options, they tend to summarize things into appetizers, drinks, entrees, and maybe you have, salads or fish versus steak or whatever, depending on where you are. Now, like we kind of joke, sometimes we end up like alphabetizing the Cheesecake Factory menu and handing that to somebody, which is not helpful at all, right? And so if you think about breaking it into those groupings, the appetizers versus entrees or whatever, and break down into a series of choices that can, even if they're done sequentially one after another, it can help build some momentum when it's done that way versus feeling just so incredibly overwhelming. And so with the paradox of choice, what happens is, again, we have that kind of analysis paralysis, being another term that will have come up a lot. There was a really interesting study that was done at a grocery store, and they had people tasting different jam. So they had, you come by, taste some jam, you get a coupon to get $1 off going to buy jam. And when they had, I think it was 24 different jams you could taste, they had a lot of people come by and try jam, but only 3% ended up buying anything. When they changed it up and they only had 3 or 6 jams that were available to taste, they had a 30% conversion rate. So way less people tried, but way more of them ended up buying. So you get the right people that are interested, and it's not this overwhelming type of decision where you think, well, I'll go talk to the family and see what one they might like, or you have your kids are fighting over which type of jam they like because they each got to try 18 flavors or something. And now we're full and nobody ever wants to eat jam again.
So Melina, how do you walk kind of the fine line between, I didn't know we were going to be thinking so much about choice today, but I like it. Kind of the fine line between helping them make the decision or manipulating them.
That's always my question, Bob. That was actually my similar thing too.
See, because
here's
the thing, like at the risk of exposing myself to some of my former clients or bosses, like when a boss says, give me 3 options that I can pick from, I always do the one that is correct, and then the one that is
expensive,
but not nearly as good, and then the one that is terrible. Right. And then because I know they'll come in, they'll be like, well, don't pick that one. And then like, between these, yeah, I'll pick the one that you want me to do. And I'm like, I feel like I need to go take a shower because I have manipulated them. So what's the fine line there?
Well, so in the space of behavioral science, behavioral economics, we work in these nudges, like I said, and then we always have free choice. And so they can go through and say, even if we only present 3 options, it doesn't mean that they have to choose any one of them, right? They could say, I don't like any of those, or like, yeah, this is interesting, but it is still too expensive. Like, let's go look for option 4. There's still something there that can be done. Typically based on how you're presenting that information. So you're not forcing them to do something. That's where you would get into what we call a shove kind of forcing. And we don't want to do that. But the thing I always say to people to know is whether you think about it or not, whether you took the time to evaluate how you wanted to present this information in a way that's going to help make the best choice, whatever you believe that to be, whether you think about it or not, it is absolutely influencing the decision that someone is going to make. And so you can't get away from, you can't say, I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be a choice architect. You are. You can't get away from it. And so in my opinion, I think it's always better to be thoughtful about it and how you present that information.
Okay, so I have another one that's actually a pivot from the choice architecture.
Yeah.
And that is rewards structure. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we've talked about and on the show we've actually have cast away, or at least put to rest, the idea of gamification. But I would love to know your thoughts on, does it work? Well, for one, and then specifically in the learning development context, like if I'm trying to help someone learn and think about the rewards, providing them rewards, whether or not you can think of physical rewards or like monetary rewards or something you can physically have, like a gift or some kind, or there is other physical rewards and things. Like, what is your thoughts and views on that? Because we have talked about this a lot, I feel, over the last few years.
Yeah. So I always like to joke, I need either like a mug or a shirt that just says "it depends" on it.
Well, we're all in the consulting industry that they pay us to do that.
We do that a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
And charge a lot for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it depends. And yes, motivation, rewards, incentives, they do work. However, they often backfire because people what you think you're motivating or incenting, or how you think you should be rewarding, or how they should perceive what it is that you are presenting, is often not looking at the true kind of like behavioral incentives of what motivates people in the right way. And so you can end up inadvertently making things a little bit worse. So
what's an example of that?
Yeah.
What would be? Yeah.
So with this, so humans naturally like to learn things, right? We actually do like the opportunity to better ourselves. We are curious by nature. We're kind of wanting to figure things out, be in on a secret, and be as smart, essentially as we can be, and to test different things out. And then when you frame something, though, as, you get paid if you do it, it changes everything in the way we perceive this. So you've potentially heard where you say, like, you should never pay kids to empty the trash or take out the trash or empty the dishwasher, because they might have thought it was like fun and nice and a helpful game, but once you pay them for it once, they will never do it for free again. Mm-hmm. And they might have actually liked it, right? And so when we think about this, there was So there was a daycare that had a bunch of people that were showing up late to pick up their kids. And so they decided to impose a fine that if you come late and pick them up, and it was something nominal where it was like $5 or $15 or something if you show up late. And I think it was like $5 for 15 minutes or something. And so they think, okay, so people will know that this is a problem for us, and so we're going to put in this fee. But what happened?
Free babysitting. Yeah,
yes,
babysitting
like
for
that,
extra
and
time.
it's cheap, free cheap
Yeah.
babysitting for
Yeah.
where my kids already are. You've now taken something that was this, social bond and tie of like what is kindness and turn it into this monetary transaction to where I feel no guilt or shame in picking them up late because you've now given me permission to do it.
Right,
And it feels like everybody else is doing it. And so then, they had a problem that more people showed up late picking up, and then you take it away and it's not like people stop because you've changed the whole game. So when we think about rewards, I always caution against monetary rewards, especially at the beginning. Like there are different incentives that are positive that can be done in that monetary space, but once you introduce them, they're really, really hard to take away, and it can impact a whole lot of things. But when we think about the reward of a certificate or, you get something on your desk because you get the bragging rights of being the top contributor on something.
Or like a credential.
Right.
Like
Yep. Or something that helps. We're a herding species. And so being able to show that, I'm, stand above the herd and wanting people to be looking to me for that accolade in some way. You can have things where maybe you do get points or stuff that's helping to motivate, but more, I like to motivate with just like fun, interesting, surprising elements, and knowing that curiosity, learning, feeling like you're checking those boxes. I know you said you're out of the gamification mindset on it, but really that can motivate ongoing behavior of wanting to, complete the thing, check the box. So even having, so like you think about going to a coffee shop and they give you a, punch card, right? So, and it has 10 spots on it and none of them are punched, and they say, okay, here's your first thing. You get a punch card for when you come back in. Another place you go and they have the first 2 punched and it's got 12 total numbers on it. You're more likely to complete the one that had the 2 punched than if there were none punched to begin with. And so where you can like see what's coming and it's maybe grayed out or it's locked, or it shows, hey, you've already finished the first 2 steps. There's just one thing left to go. Like we're motivated by that. So I think it's looking at motivation, incentives, rewards in a slightly different way than perhaps how you were asking, but it's all the same type of human behavior.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so in that case, would it be more on the curiosity standpoint? Like when I think of games, there's a really good board games that you'll have something that will show you, okay, put a sticker here, there as you play. And then when you get to like the 5th play, you get to unveil something new, like open up an envelope, and that creates a new type of element that you can add, or a new card. And like, that's pretty fun. And we're always interested in like, what's next? What do we get? What's our enhancement here for our gameplay? Right. Would that be kind of part of that line that you're thinking of?
Definitely. And you could tie it into, say, when the team, think about like scavenger hunts or things that are maybe outside of the learning that's helping. If you have a conversation with your team and people or nominate you maybe for having accomplished this, and like check the box to say that you went and talked to them, and that comes in, then you get this extra bonus thing that you can unlock, and maybe it's a training module that you get access to that you only get when 5 people say you did whatever the thing was. So those sorts of things definitely that are curiosity, motivation inducing. And I really look to dopamine as a, for brain chemical wise. Dopamine is tied to anticipation and not really knowing what's going to happen. So if we take it to games, you think about like in Candy Crush, they give you a set number of moves that you get to complete the certain thing, and it's always so close, right? And as you're getting ready to finish the round or whatnot, your brain is going crazy in the best possible way, that it's like, oh my goodness, am I going to make it in the number of moves? And you're really focused, and you're like, your brain is getting so much good juice in that moment. And once you know you won, you just don't care anymore because you won, right? It's over. And that's because you're not getting that dopamine in that anticipation anymore. Same as if you go to a movie, Paul Zak, again, like all of what you probably will have talked with him about, some of these brain chemical things going on within the brain as we're just thinking about, like, is Harry going to defeat Voldemort at the end, or what's going to happen in Star Wars, right? Those moments, even where we've seen the hero's journey a gazillion million times, it feels different this time, and we're not quite sure. Our brains really love that. And so when you can build in some of those moments of anticipation where you're not really sure if you're going to make it through, if you're going to get through whatever it is, that's a really good way. And when you do have something that's expected, all we can ever be is really satisfied. So when you have unexpected moments of things that are delightful, that is where people kind of laugh. They are more likely to remember what it is. Surprise and delight is a really powerful tool in building some of that joy and positive association with what's going on. And you want to keep going to the next.
I have another pop culture reference
Yay.
that happens to come from one of the movies that I know at least Jake and I like. I think Bob likes. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Agent Sadusky, I'm not against you, but I found door number 3 and I'm going to take it.
I'm going to take it.
National treasure.
National treasure.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
he gave him 2 options.
Yeah.
He didn't like either one. I found door number 3.
Yeah.
I love it.
I would really love an option that doesn't lead to prison.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Exactly. Well, Melina,
I really don't want to go to prison.
Yeah, we are deep into running out of time for our podcast today. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. I feel like I say this a lot, but you know what? I always mean it. Thank you so much for coming on, and would love to have you on again and dive more into this. And
Yeah.
I know you and I will continue talking, and we'll see where things go. It's great. Tell us again. We talked about your website at the beginning, but point people to where can they find you?
Yeah, so the website is thebrainybusiness.com. That has information for the podcast, my books, teaching, training, things like that. And it is now, searchable with information if you're interested in leadership, if you're interested in habits, you can go find related podcast episodes and books from me and others, talking about this along the way. And you can also find me on all the socials as The Brainy Biz, B-I-Z, or Melina Palmer on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Thank
hope
you,
everybody
Melina.
does.
Yeah, thank you.
By the way, thank you for bringing in Star Wars because we hadn't yet. And speaking of podcasts, for everybody who I know is going to be looking for it, I am changing the name of my Star Wars podcast. I know this because I workshopped this with the guys, but I got feedback to make it a little bit more descriptive of what's actually in the tin. So the Star Wars Cleaning Crew is becoming short for a stormtrooper, a 15-minute Star Wars podcast. So if you do already subscribe, it'll just change. If you don't already subscribe, take a look at that. Watch Jake and Dana's grimaces as I plug my other podcast on this podcast, which was the other advice that I got.
You've been doing it multiple times, so we're just used
Jake,
to it.
I think
There's
we
no
need
more
to start
surprise.
charging him a fee for that.
You know what?
I'll
trade
psychology
you.
is.
I'll trade you a plug for a dad joke, Dana, and we'll see how far we get.
I anticipate that will happen. I do not have any surprise or delight because I know it's coming.
Meanwhile, thanks everybody for joining us. Fantastic talk today. Thanks for our listeners for joining us. And please join us again on our next episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, which will be real soon. Take care. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.